of our fireside chat. And by fireside, for me, I mean I'm in the car, and the nearest fire to me is the big orange ball in the sky. I like to call it Bob, big orange ball. Uh, I'm your chief librarian here with Alexandria RPG. If you don't know who we are, we're a nonprofit role-playing game library. We travel around to events and share our library with as many people as possible. We talk about the history of gaming and share all the cool, awesome things you can do with RPGs, including gaming with veterans with PTSD or at-risk teens, all the cool stuff that you can do, and just the amazing world of gaming, because sitting down at a table with a bunch of people that you may or may not know and having a awesome chance to just share, do collaborative storytelling in some way, shape, or form while possibly throwing math rocks at a table can be immensely fun. And our guest today is Vincent Baker, game designer with Vindicated. What would you like to tell us about yourself there, Vincent?
Hey, happy to be here. I'm a super passionate artist, writer, game designer. I love tabletop games, video games, anime, all kinds of fun stuff. And I'm just super excited to be here. I'm also streaming from a different location. So if someone has seen any of my past videos, you probably have not recognized the setup. It's because I'm at my grandparents' house. We have a family Halloween party that's about to kick off whenever this will be over. So I am just already set up here. I left some of my stuff at home, but we made do. We're going to make it work, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's funny that we're both kind of away from our normals. And yeah, if everybody recognizes, I'm in a car, and if you follow us for a while, you'll know that last year I was doing some streaming from oddball locations because I was in Ukraine. So I'd be walking around on my phone around like containers, or found I was doing them at like 11 o'clock at night Ukrainian time. So I was able to go into my office.
Yeah, that's some dedication right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was great because we were able to get things rolling, and we just passed 200 subscribers, which like, oh, that doesn't sound like much, but we're such a niche little thing, and as we get our name out there, more and more people see what we're doing, and it's continuously growing. And now we're streaming to both YouTube and Twitch, so our stuff is saved in 2 locations, even though after like 30 days they fall off of Twitch, so they'll be up on YouTube for as long as Google keeps doing YouTube as a project.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I know it takes a lot of work to get there, so it's tough, but you're putting in the work, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah. So what are some cool things that you have designed in the RPG space?
Yeah, so I do tabletop RPGs. I also do card games and some other stuff. But for the RPG space specifically, the biggest thing I've done is a tabletop RPG called Otherworlds. It's basically what I like to call a future fantasy. So it's like if you had your fantasy settings, but you sort of had some tech thrown in. There is a lore reason for that. That game is a bit more tactical, a bit more about character customization, creation options, and just really giving you the opportunity to sort of like imagine a character, create that using the rule system, and it's sort of like a rules light to medium system. So there's a bit of crunch to it, but it's not super crunchy, because I still want players to be able to have fun and be able to play even if they're at the more casual level where they're not as experienced or used to playing something that's like just 500 pages here, 200 pages here, and trying to remember everything. It's meant to be pretty streamlined, but is a bit more of the tactical variety. And that one's been a lot of fun. We've had good feedback on that one. I also have Legendaria, which is a game I released in 2019. That game is played through texting, so it's actually meant to be. It's a role-playing game where it's based where each round kind of goes out throughout the days, and you can play remotely from wherever you're at, and you sort of like send in your actions to the game master, and there's a certain set list of actions that you can take, and there's certain things you can play. The basis of that game is you're playing different legends throughout time, so you'll end up having you'll be summoned to Camelot, only to find that King Arthur has been he's gone missing, he's dead, or like Merlin's gone missing, and you come across Morgana and you sort of interact with that, or you might go to the Salem witch trials and you see some stuff happening there. You can sort of change how you want to sort of interact with that environment. And so that game just plays completely different from the other games I do. So and what I'm here to talk to you guys about today mostly is Black Paper Moon, which I do have a little prototype copy with me today, and it's currently on Kickstarter. Each game I do, though, I like to sort of I like to make sure it has its own unique purpose. So this one is the quickest and lightest of the games. It is all contained within this this like box that is styled like a manga, which even has like the writing on the side, and it has like it looks like there's pages. The point of this game is to be very easy to pick up and play, drop in front of anyone, even people that's never heard of a tabletop RPG. It's very like improv friendly. You can create a character in a couple minutes. It's like super fast, super streamlined, super rules light, and that's sort of like the basis for Black Paper Moon, which is different than the other two games I just previously discussed.
Awesome. So why did, I mean, so one, I want to get my hands on the Legendaria thing because I started researching. Have you heard Alice is Missing?
Yeah, so that came out a year later, and it really struck me because I was like, yeah, it's like, wow, okay, and it's cool that I'm happy that they like they're really successful with that because I heard that they picked up like a Netflix series, I think.
Yeah, there's some in the works.
Yeah, so it's crazy, but it did remind me of that.
Yeah, so I'd never seen a concept like that before. So I'm actually, so that we can take games like Legendaria or Alice is Missing to events and not have to worry about strangers sharing phone numbers, I'm actually building out a little system. It's based on LoRa radios. They're long range, low power radios, and I can connect some generic cell phones to them, and everybody can just text. And then you can actually wander around the space. And,
that's huge. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And okay,
it'll be little portable network I can take anywhere, and it's also available if emergencies happen. I can bust that out, and if the world ends, I have communications.
Yeah, I will say that when I created Legendaria, I struggled. Like I've never really properly shown that game at conventions, and that's part of the reason is it's just awkward. Like I felt like it's just like a weird situation where you're like, all right, everyone exchange numbers, do this and that. So it was very hard for me to sort of figure out how to market it, how to talk about it, especially like when I was doing it. I didn't even have Alice is Missing as like sort of like a blueprint for like what to follow when it came to this game. So I was completely like not sure what to do. The idea came from watching an anime actually though called it's like called the Fate series. In particular, I like one called Fate Zero. And in that you basically have all these people plotting and they all have their own objectives, and sometimes they'll form alliances with other people. Sometimes they will directly attack someone. Sometimes they will form an alliance and then betray them. But everyone has their own objective, sort of like Game of Thrones in that way. And I was thinking like, well, what's a good way to do a tabletop RPG representation of that? Because if you were to all sit at a table in your sort of classic D&D fashion, and you're like, hey, I plan to betray that guy or whatever, people obviously know. So the texting came out of the need of thinking of like, okay, well, what's a way that you could like tell someone something but be telling someone else another thing, and it not be obvious that you're whispering to someone or you're passing a secret note or something. So that's where the idea came from, to have it through like texting and having through like Messenger, and playing it that way. But the biggest difference with Legendaria is it's very much like this sort of a by the time you're playing and after you're done, it tells a very grand like magical story of like these epic battles that take place, and it feels like it just feels very grandiose in the way it plays out. I mean, we had situations where you'd have like Robin Hood go back to his like he has like a fortification up in a tree. He goes back after like acquiring some new arms and talking to some people in the town, and then whenever he heads back on this dark stormy night, lightning flashes, and he just sees George Washington in the corner holding his hatchet, and then he takes a step back, goes to aim the arrow and shoot George Washington, and he misses the shot, and George Washington ducks, and he's like, this is for America, and just cuts him and then kicks him off the treetop and then kills him. So you just have like these really crazy scenarios that take place, or you'll have like a legendary samurai, and you'll have this philosopher that can like reflect light and all this weird stuff, and it just plays out like every time I played it, it always creates just a very unique, interesting story. But I fully go into it knowing it's not for everyone, because if you're not into that idea of like being pitted against other players in like a battle scenario, then it's not going to be for you. Like I will just go ahead and admit it, like right off the top. If you don't like the idea of like kind of it being very like conflict oriented and sort of like plotting and sort of like betraying and sort of that Game of Thrones style or like a battle royale type style, it's probably not going to be for you, to be honest.
But there are players out there that are looking for stuff like that. There's not a lot out there in the RPG world that will give people that.
Yeah, and that's what I try to do. Like I said, when I create a game, I just for whatever reason don't like the idea of just creating something that feels like it's just outclassed by everything else for whatever it's trying to do. So I try to create like a unique. I try to like look at what's there and I try to create my own unique take on it and try to like put that in and say like, if you want this specifically, then this is for you.
Nice. Yeah. Have you done a physical copy of Legendaria?
I actually have not. So out of all the games I've released, I think Legendaria might be the least. I don't know. I'd say like the least popular, the least engaged among the stuff I've released. So, and I'm not saying in terms of like reviews or like when people play it, like people that play it love it. But in terms of like just the engagement, as far as like my ability to like put it out there, tell people about it, and engaging their interest off of it, and seeing if they're wanting to play it. It hasn't been there as much as other stuff.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is when I go to conventions, though, since I do the card game aspects as well, and I also have like this physical prototype for Black Paper Moon, it's really easy for me to show this off, show off the card games, and so it's easier for those to kind of take off since I do a lot of shows and conventions. Whereas Legendaria, like, it is a bit tougher. But I'll also say I also was like not using Drive-Thru RPG, and Drive-Thru RPG, like using it now, opens up a lot of avenues to actually have a physical version made. The reason why I wasn't using it, because people watching might be like, why in the world were you not using Drive-Thru RPG? In 2016, when I was a bit fresher to the scene and I was trying to use Drive-Thru RPG, I had a bad incident where they printed off tons of copies that I paid for, and all the copies were like completely ruined. They're like they had black boxes all over them. The formatting was all messed up. There were some pages that were supposed to be separate. They were condensed on the one page, and there was a split down the middle. It was like, and I did an unboxing video, like where I had it on video, and I was so excited. I was like, "Hey guys, I'm so excited! Here's my game!" And I showed it to the camera before I looked at it. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she just like was like smiling, and then I just saw this look on her face. I was like, "What's going on?" I turned to look at it, and it was all messed up. And I just couldn't get it resolved with them. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I wasn't really getting help from them. I have a few friends around where I live that have been doing layout design and printing for, I think one guy's been doing it for like 30, 40 years. And he told me that it just seemed insane that like I was charged for all these books when they were printed at that, like, to be unusable. So I just felt like, okay, well, I can't get this worked out, and I'm just annoyed by it. So I'm just going to do it all myself, you know? So sometimes I take it upon myself to just sort of try to do everything on my own. I'm like, I'm going to put it on my website. I'll do it this way, this way. I ended up working with a local college that had like a printing service, and I got those books printed through them. And it was very, like, they took the same files, they printed them off, they were higher quality, they were half the price. So I was like, I just was writing off of that for a long time. But over the years, especially the last couple of years when I was doing more with Other Worlds, and I'm doing more with other RPG stuff, I see that Drive-Thru RPG is very important, and I'm like, okay, let me go back to Drive-Thru RPG. So
they've gotten much better.
Yeah. Yeah, and we just got something printed from Drive-Thru RPG as a test run, and it all came out perfect. So so I'm happy to say that we did put something back on there, and we actually just received it, I think, 2 weeks ago, and it all looked good. But that was for we're currently testing the physical printings for Other Worlds, which we just got that in. So Other Worlds is our main priority for that, and then we'll look at Legendary after that. We currently do have Other Worlds and Legendaria both on Drive-Thru RPG on our storefront. We don't have either of them currently available for physical, but we are definitely looking at having both available for physical. And like I said, the Other Worlds one is currently fine for that, but we're going to be looking at probably doing some sort of campaign to sort of set up some things to where we can have like a proper launch for that.
Nice. Yeah, and yeah, Drive-Thru has come a long ways. I mean, they've been around for quite some time, but looking at stuff that I received through the library from them in 2016 to things that we just got like in the mail the other day from them, it's like what night and day difference.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear too, because I feel weird because I'm someone that if you like hang out with, I hate being negative or saying anything negative at all to anyone, especially if like they're not like actively like mean people or anything. But that's just like what the story is, and like I said, I like Drive Through RPG now, and we're gonna be setting up a lot more stuff on there.
Yeah. I also try to be as positive as possible. It's tough sometimes. So I try to tell most companies when you're doing any social media or anything, if you've got something negative, say probably just not a good idea. The old Bambi's mom. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean,
you want to go after some of the trolls or whatever online that trying to poke the bear, and you're like, oh, have a good day. Not we're gonna put out a positive message and let everybody see that we're good people and carry on.
Exactly, because I mean, people will definitely see how you respond, so you have to respond with some sort of maturity at the very least, where people see that and they're like, okay, yeah, like we get where he's coming from, or
Yeah. And you get some people think, oh, hey, if we go this edgy route on this, and we'll get more customers, and ultimately you just end up losing more of your kind of middle ground customers that didn't care about what was done in the first place, or have like, why were you posting about this? Like it wasn't a big deal or whatever. You end up alienating, probably more people than you've gained.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a little off topic, but I've been doing some light sort of business courses, and a lot of it's talking about like your brand and your archetype and this and that. And one thing it helped me realize is like, okay, let me outline some core principles, some things that I think Vindicated represents and what it should represent, and sort of like what it shouldn't, and like what we shouldn't touch on, what we should touch on. And that way, if anything ever comes up, excuse me, if anything ever comes up that I think like, oh, maybe I should talk about this, or maybe this is something that's important, or this or that, I can kind of look back to these core principles and see how they align with that, and just sort of say like, okay, this is in our wheelhouse of something we talk about, or this is in our wheelhouse of what we don't talk about, or like this is how we address problems, or this is how we don't address problems, and just have that clearly defined. So anytime you question it, you just go back to that and you stay consistent the whole time.
Yeah. And in the library, we're a 501c3, so we've got like a couple things legally. It's like we have to stay out of politics because as a 501c3, that's kind of one of your things. You got to stay out of politics.
Oh, so yeah, no,
that's made it really easy, because it's like, oh, hey, we don't talk about that. And then knowing most of the people within the library, like we have a lot of people of different political backgrounds, but because it's nothing to do with any of our core thing, we all get along. We talk about role-playing games, and like I see that and I love it, because I go, man, I wish more people that would get away from their keyboards and just go play games, and we'd probably have a better country.
yeah no, okay, so no, I agree. So one of our core principles is, like I technically created Vindicated 10 years ago. Now it started off a lot different. It's kind of more of me just doing graphic logos and design for people, with me sort of using my art to make some of my own games, or like, here's the idea for games. But it had never been political before. We haven't been political with like our statements, or how we sort of, because like with our team, like the people I work with, we're very, we have people kind of from different walks of life, different beliefs, whether it's religion, politics, whatever it is. And I think like the crux of it is like, hey, as long as we just treat each other like we care, and then we have like empathy, and like we're just there for one another, and we treat people, we treat each other like human beings, that's just like the important part. And I think that's possible while still having some difference in opinion. So so like so we're not political, and that's part of one of our core things. It is tough though, because some people will challenge you and say like, oh, well, this is political, or like this isn't political, or they'll try to like, because some things are a bit gray when it comes to that. But
yeah, and I've made some posts. I posted something about a game, and I was like, hey, the layout of this book is really cool, and this is the the game of the day or whatever, or the book of the day, and then I got just lit up in like direct messages like, oh my god, I can't believe you're talking about that. Do you know what that person is? And I'm like, please go back and read tweets, or the message. It was like, it's about the book and the layout. I didn't talk about the game designer or their ideas or their histories. Like, that's nothing to do with what we're discussing. I was like, the book layout is really awesome, and it'd be awesome. It'd be great if you go back and look at how well that's done, and maybe you, as a game designer, you could learn it from that. And he's like,
Yeah,
oh,
and
just get lit up again. I'm like, oh, have a wonderful day. Like,
yeah,
you just have to
and
realize
I
that.
mean, it gets so crazy where like a lot of the popular shows, like if you like or dislike it, people feel like that means more than what it might mean. It's like, oh, I like this show or I don't like this show, and it's like, oh, well, that must mean you're on this side or something. It's like, well,
Yeah,
I just
and it's
don't
like,
like the show. I don't know.
yeah, sometimes it just like, everybody said, oh, you'll love Dexter, when that show was out, and I watched it. I was like, it's not my thing. Like,
I haven't
yeah,
watched it. Yeah.
yeah, I watched like 2 episodes. I was like, that wasn't my thing, and everyone's like, oh, can't believe you didn't like that. And I was like, what do you think of me? Like, that I would love a movie about psychos. Like,
A lot of people do, for some
yeah,
reason, but yeah, I haven't watched that show yet, so I don't have an opinion.
a lot of people were like, you've never watched a single episode of Game of Thrones? I was like, no, I've read a couple George R. R. Martin books before he did the Song of Fire and Ice stuff, and he loves to write characters, and he doesn't know how to end storylines, so he just murders characters. It's the easiest way to get out of a story arc. And so I knew what was gonna happen. And they were like, well, but you've got to watch this. And I was like, I don't know, it's just not my thing. I was like, I'm not a huge fan of George R. R. Martin. And they're
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
and you
How
get
could
lit up
you?
like, you must not like fantasy. I was like, well, let me tell you something. I do.
Yeah, and I get it all the time because I work a lot in like say like the anime space, but a lot of the popular anime I don't like. There's like a lot of the anime I like are kind of more obscure and niche, and that's not always the big ones that people talk about. Or even when it comes to board games, like a lot of the main board games people talk about don't really appeal to me, or it's not really my cup of tea. I have no problems with people. I love board games as a hobby, so like I'm kind of like more the merrier. Everyone have fun, enjoy the games that you like. But just some of the games aren't personally for me, and sometimes I feel like people feel kind of attacked by that, even though it's like it doesn't affect them at all.
Yeah, and I mean, there's plenty. Tons of board games, tons of RPGs that come my way, and I look through them and I see, they're pretty well put together, but it's just not my cup of tea. And I talk about the things that I like and I would like to see more of within the RPG world, but I also like to talk to people about the things that that other people like. And sometimes it's hard because I've got to find the positive in something that I don't like, but I know is a good product. Like My Little Pony, not
Hey,
my
I'm
cup of
I'm
tea at
about to
all.
hey, I'm
Oh,
having a issue where I'm about to disconnect, but I'm gonna.
oh no, we lost him. He should be right back. After these messages, we'll be right back. Well, I can't see the chat right now, so if anybody has questions, I'm sure that my lovely assistant, Carissa, will copy and paste them to me. Hi, Carissa. She doesn't have her headphones on, so she has no clue I'm talking about her. Um, so while we wait for Vincent to come back, as soon as he comes back, I want to start talking about his game that's on Kickstarter right now. Even though we went kind of a different way. Welcome to the wonderful world of just doing fireside chats. Uh, and it's refreshing to hear that somebody has come up with, values for their company, or sticking by it, because I do know some people that have done that in game companies. There's some companies that I don't see eye to eye with with on some things, but I really respect their, like, they have their values written out, and they do a pretty good job of sticking by them. It's always nice when you see that. Let's see. Let's see if I can pull up some stuff about Black Paper Moon. Do, 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 do. Where did my... Oh, I should be able to just open a new tab. Or I've got Kickstarter. It has an app on this phone. Let me see if I can. Ooh, pardon me. A lot of water today. Everybody gets to see me mouth out as I speak or as I type. Of course, if you watch, you'll probably see I will do searches and stuff while we're on stream sometimes. And oh yeah, this is one I briefly talked about um, on Monday, and thought it looked cute. Digging the art. And oh, do you do you? Oh, well, um, I was saying it's really nice to see companies that are making games for people to play. So if we don't get Vincent back, sure Carissa will link to Black Paper Moon in the chat. We looked at it briefly on Monday, and we'll look at it again tomorrow on news and everything. I love people that make games that just want people to play, and that's hugely important to me. I don't personally, I don't care, your background. If you want to sit down and game with people, do that and just be a good person. Like Vincent was saying, just be good to each other. And that's it's funny because with role playing games, we find that once you're sitting down at a table, uh, you tend to be really good to the people around you and have good relationships. You create good relationships because you want to keep that gaming group going. It's a beautiful incentive to keep people working together and playing games. So hearing Vincent say, that's kind of, the people in their company just, they're one of their goal or their core uh, functions is just, be good to each other. I always like to hear that. Warms my heart. Does everybody hate or love the mustache? Just maybe we'll have to see if we can get Vincent to come back another day. Um, Windows. He's got 17 days to go. So maybe we can get him to come in on a Thursday. That seemed to actually work out well. So, well, if we don't get him back in the next couple minutes or so, I'm going to have to say that we need to go. And then we'll reach out to Vincent and see if Vincent is available Thursday evening and start over and actually talk about Black Paper Moon, because I really want to talk about it. One, I'm a big anime geek. Most people don't know that I love anime. I don't watch it as much. I love to peruse it from time to time. Probably need to sit down and watch more stuff. Maybe maybe that'll motivate me to get my living room cleaned up and get the projector and everything all set up. I think maybe that'll make Carissa happy too. Okay, we'll give him a couple more minutes. Anybody have any questions out there? Boom. Okay, well, looks like we lost Vincent, and we'll let Vincent go and have a good Halloween event with his family. We'll contact him and we'll see if we can do something on this Thursday, because that the Thursday evening that we did last week did well, and see, there was a lot of activity. Some of it was people from their own group, but oh, somebody asked how was my flight yesterday, because so I'm on duty this weekend for the military, and got last minute notification that there was a DV that came in, and got to fly on a Black Hawk and go see a bunch of cool stuff. Oh, hey, Vincent's back. All right. Okay.
Charger, which someone had a charger, but they didn't have like the power brick. So then I had to find a power brick, and then we plugged it up where I was, and it turns out that none of those outlets work. So then I had to find another room to go into to then plug it into the, yeah. So, but here nice. I am. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah.
Okay, Carissa, are we both live? Can everybody hear us? Okay, awesome. So welcome back. And as while you were gone, I was saying I love that kind of one of your ethos is making games that just people want to play. Like everybody can sit down and play, and it's kind of the just everybody be good to each other kind of thing. And I like that. I wish more people were just really good to each other.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. And like it was funny because the last review that I saw for Otherworlds, the guy said at first he was thrown off because the language that I was using was a bit more casual. And he said that though after he was reading it, he really got into it. And then he ended up loving the game for. He said it was the perfect like creativity spark. Nice. But yeah, but so some people think I kind of take things a little more casual when it comes to the games and how I put it and stuff, but it is meant for that because it's meant to be, I have a lot of friends and family members that like playing games, but they're not like the most hardcore gamers. So it's like, okay, like, is this something that you can also get into and play?
Yeah, and we need games of all like levels, because I've seen hardcore gamers get into Honey Heist, a little one pager that, and just fall in love with it, and then you need games that you can sit down with people, because a lot of people are like, oh, my first game was D&D. Well, there's a lot to like consume at that first, at your first sit down with a game like D&D, and then there's even there's games with more and more and more in them. So having those great games that you can just sit down and go, okay, character creation is 45 seconds, and let's get playing. And we need all levels throughout there, because you will get some people introduced into RPGs and they don't want that big heavy game, or they want to try something new kind of every week, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes people conflate like simple with meaning like there's not much to it, and normally that is the case. Like normally if it's simple, there's less depth, there's less to it. But I enjoy trying to find the like cross section between something that's simple and sort of like intuitive, easy to learn, but also has like depth to it and things that you can actually think about. So when it comes to like the card games I've made, especially something like Spell Slingers, I come from sort of a like a TCG background where I grew up playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and then Magic the Gathering for a while. And my dad actually paid to have a pro Magic player tutor me hourly on how to play Magic the Gathering professionally. So I have like a huge kind of 1v1 TCG mindset, which is the opposite of someone casual. But I try to cross the two, because I love thinking of strategies and thinking of combos and these intricate plays you can make between your abilities or your cards or whatever it may be. But I also love seeing someone be able to pick up a game and things feel intuitive to them. I love design that just makes sense to people. You read it, and all you have to do is read it one time, and you understand what it's trying to say and what it means. And there's sort of an ability to just sort of comprehend it, where it just feels like it just is intuitive for you.
Nice. It's I come from a very strange background of TCGs, because I played Magic basically beta until Urza's, and then I got back into it later. But I was in the pipeline to be part of one of the first pro tours, and realized I was taking things way too serious, and the game was no longer fun. So I have that mindset still of finding all those crazy little bits and pieces, but I also only play Commander now.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a question from the chat.
Yeah, no, I get that. Okay,
go
awesome.
Ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm the same way. I can be competitive in a way, but I never let that competition come before having a good time and making sure people have a good time.
Yeah, and I felt that I got into Warhammer 40K for a while, and I was getting overly competitive there, and it was like, man, I'm killing my fun again. And then my wife goes, hey, why don't you play orcs? So then I just built silly orc armies for a while, and in fact, my Tau, all my gun drones for my Tau got too close to my orcs, and I just painted smiley faces on top of all my gun drones.
Yeah, it was my way to having fun while games. Otherwise, I don't see what the point is.
Exactly, it was my way to take myself down a couple notches of being overly competitive to going and having fun. And I still, with 40K for ages, I was still taking part in a lot of events, but I would go and if I didn't win, I'm like, whatever, I had a blast today. My price of admission was worth the smiles on my face, and I got I was much happier to leave an event with best sportsman than I was with first or second place.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is abnormal for most most players at a tournament. Okay, question from the chat.
Yeah.
Does your experience with TCGs ever influence your RPG designs? Specifically, do any PvP elements within the party ever factor into the role-playing elements?
I'd say my background has to shape somewhat of my design, even on a level that I'm not fully aware of. On a more conscious level, I feel like sort of on a combat perspective, it can sort of be influenced by TCGs, because when you have sort of your battles or monsters fight in TCGs, you notice that players, whether they're kids or adults, they never complain about that not being fun. If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh and you have a blue eyes white dragon and it obliterates your opponent's monster, you don't say, oh well, I didn't account for my stamina, and if he was doing okay with his mental health or whatever. It's just no, I played blue eyes, he's strong, and he blew away that creature. So with my RPG design, for example, I love the tactical elements, so I like there to be a bit more to it than that, of course. I don't want it to be a simple, you compare that number to that number. But I do think I like to streamline it because of my TCG background. But I wouldn't say that my background makes it so I want to necessarily put players versus players. Legendaria just sort of came from that in terms of what it was going for, since it has that sort of, everyone kind of has their own objective and their own mission, their own story. And sometimes other players fall into that, and players can actually, we've had games won by multiple players banding together, but it's solely based on if that naturally happens or not. Like if you meet other players in that world and you actually have a conversation with them, and you have a common goal that you're trying to work towards, you don't have to betray each other. You can actually win the game together. You can actually go through it together, depending on the scenario, the characters, and like what you want to do. But we've had multiple games won by either 2 people or multiple people. But you know, that sort of like PvP aspect of it is just the nature of giving players that freedom, whereas that's often looked down upon, and I think for good reason. Like if you play D&D, Otherworlds, or more of your traditional tabletop RPG, because honestly, like if I'm running Otherworlds, I don't want players like getting upset at each other, trying to kill each other and stuff like that. That's not like the environment that I'm going into Otherworlds trying to have. And you know, so I wouldn't encourage that for Otherworlds or for D&D or anything like that, unless that's just right off the top what you're trying to go for, and you let your players know, like, hey, like this is just going to be a bloodbath and we're all going to attack each other. Like if people know that's what they're getting into, sure, but like that's not where I come from with Otherworlds. It's just that way for Legendaria based on how it is. But like I said, players can team up together, and players can also betray each other. It's just up to the players and based off the story and the characters and what they want to do.
Nice. Yeah, it's I like having options for different types of games out there. And there's not a lot of PvP RPGing out there. Even though
yeah,
you get onto a MMORPG, you know, the PvP servers are more populated than the PvE servers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like a lot of people will just sort of mock the idea of it before like trying it. And like I said, Legendary wouldn't be for everyone, but I do think it might surprise some people that play it. Like some people that play it might be surprised by how much they enjoy it, because when we first were doing the play test for it, a lot of people I was reaching out to had no idea what I was going for. They didn't understand the premise. They're like, what do you mean you can play through texting on your phone? Like they were worried that they were going to be too busy. They're like, hey, I'm in the middle of moving. Like I'm moving from like this state to this state. Like, how do you expect me to play this game? And I was like, well, just give it a try. If you can't like play it, like just play it for a round. And if it doesn't work for you, you can drop out. You know, no worries at all. You know, like we'll just have your character, you know, just drop out of it. And unilaterally, anytime someone just gave it a chance and they played it, they're like, oh yeah, no, this is cool, and like they get super into it and play it. So it had a really, it was just really nice to see people kind of like have that switch turn on for them.
Yeah. And I always like hearing about that. So your game that's on Kickstarter right now, Black Paper Moon.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that so far? And you know, you've got a box design and everything, so you're much further along than some people are when they go to Kickstarter.
Yeah. So with Black Paper Moon, it sort of came from mine and my wife's love of the spooky and whimsy, as we've been saying. We're a huge fan of like this time of the year. We also celebrate Summerween, which we took from a show called Gravity Falls, which is like a Disney cartoon that I did not think I'd like, but she showed it to me and I loved it. And so we just love the spooky and the whimsical. And so Black Paper Moon is sort of inspired by that design, which is to say, like, you know, it's not meant to be like the dark, gritty, gothic horror, like everything's miserable, people are dead all the time. I don't have problems with that, but you know, my wife's not the hugest fan of that genre, and you know, we do see a lot of that out there. So I thought it'd be fun to sort of tackle something that was meant to be a bit more lighthearted in its approach for that, because you know, while we have some monsters, the ghosts and the werewolves and the vampires, it's just meant to be a lighter tone. So it's kind of meant it's meant to be okay to have fun and laugh at it, and that won't disrupt the setting itself. So, you know, if you're trying to play like a very serious, dark tone and people are dying and everything's grim, there's sort of like a difference between that moment and then everyone laughing at the table and having a good time playing. So Black Paper Moon just sort of leans into the idea that someone might slip on a banana pill or someone might do something just completely absurd. And it also goes into the nature of just being able to make your character very quickly, and you can make your character whatever you want it to be. So one of the main mechanics of Black Paper Moon, though, because like I said, I try to come up with like new, interesting ideas. This one involves what we call a die tower, which is comprised of several dice. So some people are like, well, don't you mean a dice tower? But no, I'm doing some wordplay. So die tower, because as you build the tower up, if it falls over, your character dies, or something bad happens. So it depends if you're doing like a one shot, and you're just kind of like playing just to have fun or whatever, just that one evening. You play it where it's kind of like intense, where your character will pass away if the die tower crumbles. But you can also play it where it's more of like just a consequence and things start unraveling out of control and going bad for the characters. And that'd be more recommended for a longer form campaign that you're playing with it. Yeah, so I think I'll hand it back to you though, to ask more questions.
Okay. How does the die tower work? Is it you roll, and if it's a failure, you stack the die up?
Exactly. And in almost every case, it's normally a one dice per fail. There are cases though where you can have a critical fail, and you'll need to stack 2 up.
Yeah. What kind of dice does it use?
It's an exclusive 6-sided dice system, which has currently been every tabletop RPG that Vindicated Entertainment's released.
Okay. 6-sided is one of my favorites, just because it's the one that everybody knows and understands. Like, people get the mechanics behind a D6, and they kind of innately understand a lot of the math behind it. Whereas, as much as I love the other dice, I like the D12. It's probably my favorite out of the math rocks, because it's the least constrained, but it's also the least swingy. Because like a D20 is pretty swingy. The difference between 1 and 20 is a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, I like the D6 for a lot of similar reasons. It's the one that like everyone could probably find a few of around their house if they need to. And I think it also goes sort of to the ethos I was talking about earlier about being open to just people playing, or like it's the dice most people are familiar to, especially when you're looking outside the hobby. Like if they think of dice, they're probably thinking of a 6-sided dice. So it's just something that I gravitated towards, especially like I used to make fan-made games when I was a kid, and the first one I remember making was a Mario like tabletop RPG, but it was played like on a board. And as you moved around the board, you'd play with your friends, and in my case, I'd play with my sister, my cousin, and we each chose a character. We would acquire new items, and we actually role played it. But I had no idea what role playing was. It's just what we were doing as kids, and all I had available was 6-sided dice. So that's just like how I made games. And so every game I made from being 5 years old to 6, 7, 10, whatever it may be, I always use 6-sided dice. So I like the other dice, but that's just the one I felt like it spoke truest to me and like my background and like what I do and like what Vindicated is about and stuff. So that's also not to say that I would never make a game that doesn't use the other dice, but it's just been very natural to use the 6-sided dice.
Yeah. And like I said, it's that one that everybody knows, so they get it. And I always love that, because you don't have to explain anything. And then when you say, "Hey, roll me a D6," everybody goes, "Oh, this die." Because you sit at the table like, "Hey, can you roll me a D8?" No, that's a 10. Nope, that's a 12. No, there you go, that's a D8.
Yeah, well, one of my things too, like if we're in the moment, we're having like a good story beat happening, or like you guys are in combat. I love things to kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna move in, I attack, I do this, I'm gonna charge my spell. Like I love it when things are streamlined enough to where like it feels like the combat's flowing. And so I try to make my games that way, and I think using just the 6-sided dice helps with that, because there's not those like getting rid of those few seconds of pauses and getting rid of several of those just makes it so everything just feels like it's moving a lot faster.
Exactly. And especially, if you're making a game that is trying to be more accessible to the non gamer with a capital G, the somebody that's grown up with it, it's like, oh, I've played Monopoly. I played Cops and Robbers as a kid. It's like, I always tell people we've all role played, just whether or not we've had rules behind it or not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was saying. Like when I was a kid, I role played all the time. I had no idea what that was though until I don't know, I was a teenager at some age. But I done tons of role play though as a kid. And also back to the die tower. Before I forget, we had someone ask us and brought to our attention that using the die tower mechanic online seems kind of impossible or like very weird to like a way to set it up. Also, there may be people that have certain conditions that make it very difficult, unfairly so, to use the die tower mechanic. So we've actually been constructing a new variant for it called the it's called the die roll, and basically you'll roll a dice to see if you die, and then it starts adding up. So you'd be rolling more of a pool of dice, hoping that it can cause your demise instead of being the die tower. So there is a variant for people out there if that suits them better for the game.
Nice. And it's always good to have options.
Yeah, I try to. It's a weird balance because I'm a fan of customization, options, stuff like that. But I remember it was probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago in the like board game geek group or something. People were like very harsh against the idea of having a lot of options because they said it was basically an indication that as a game designer you didn't have a clear vision because you kind of threw out every option at the table and just said, hey, you guys pick out what you want to do, and I don't really know what the one way should be kind of thing. And I was very like adverse to hearing that when I first heard it, but over time I sort of realized that perspective a bit better now, where my current perspective is somewhere in the middle, where I like to provide a very structured, streamlined experience, where it's kind of like, here's the vision, this is what you do from A, B to C, or this is kind of like the path I set for you, but here's some options in case like this is what you're looking for. So so instead of being like super nebulous and vague and just having all these variants and then making it so you don't know what you want to do with it, or having it where there's no options, I try to do the in-between where it's like, here's sort of like the path, and then here's some options for you go if you need that.
Yeah, because if you go too many options, people put your game down because they have option paralysis. It's like, hey, what do you want for dinner? Like, I don't know. Like, what are my options? Like, it's the joke, going to your boss and you're like, we give him 3 options. One that is the one we want to do. One that sounds really close, but not really feasible or is too expensive. One that's just way out there. So they think that they're picking the right thing all the time. Because you give people too many options, they're like, I just don't know. So it's like, hey, would you like hamburgers or hot dogs for dinner? Hamburgers.
Yeah, and one of my things that I love about the idea of giving options that I try to do is specifically listing why that variant is there. So for example, if I pick up a board game or a card game and it says, here's some optional rules. I hate when they just state optional rules because I'm like, well, should I use this or should I not? I love it when a game says, hey, if you're looking for a fast, fun, easier to play experience for new people, this is the rule set you should use. If you're looking for a very like long, extended, getting into the story or the lore or whatever, like here's the rules you should use. Like tell me like what in my mind should make me choose, like help me choose between these options. Don't just give me the multiple options.
Yeah, and I've seen board games do that. Like, hey, here's alternate rules, and you're like, okay, what's the big difference in this? And then you're right, because there's games that'll be like, hey, here's some alternate rules. This is our what we figured out is a quicker way to play our game. So instead of a 2-hour gameplay, this can be 45 minutes. You're like, you know what? I like your game, but I would like to try this because I don't necessarily have the time. And then I'll get some people addicted and we'll play the long form game later.
Yeah, so with Black Paper Moon and the Dice Tower, for example, it explicitly is shown as like that's the main mechanic when it comes to like the the conflict that you want to, however you want to call it. That's kind of like the main way to play. But it says if these things are true for you, if you are playing online, or if you just really hate it or feel like this is disadvantage, this is just conditioning you have or whatever, like this is the variant rule that you can play if you want to.
Nice. So what is the core behind Black Paper Moon? So you said it was the kind of cartoon horror with some anime, because you look at the Kickstarter, it's very anime inspired.
Yeah.
But so is it more horror based, or is it more fantasy based, or is it a good mix, or what?
I'd say it's definitely a mix. It's very fantastical. One of the things that we do with Vindicated is all of our games have been very fantasy based, very fantasy at heart. It's just kind of baked into the identity of what we do. And yeah, so I'd say it's like fantasy first, but it has that like spooky and whimsical vibe kind of like overlaid with it. So of course you have like on the front cover, there's a Frankenstein like character, there's a ghost, there is a type of witch, and there is a pumpkin prince.
Nice. I'm digging the pumpkin prince.
Thank you. Yeah, he is. His name is Jake, and he has an older brother named Jack, and he doesn't like Jack too much. Yeah,
For some
Jack's
reason,
the one that normally gets all the love. Yeah.
The backlight has like turned off on my phone, so I can still see you, but I can't read any questions if they pop up, which is very strange.
That is strange. I'll say, yeah. I mean, we're both going in with like all kinds of weird stuff. So for everyone watching, if you didn't know, I mean, obviously you know about the disconnect and like the weird me changing rooms, but I didn't realize how echoey this room is, and it's like kind of distracting because anytime I say something, I'm like hearing my own like echo in this room, and these like earpieces feel like I'm like drowning in water. So
just as long as you don't go full Sloth from the Goonies. Echo, echo, echo.
Yeah. So if I'm speaking in circles though, or if I seem a bit distracted, that's why. I'm very like, I'm someone that can get kind of like I don't know, distracted easy and kind of like, what's over there? What's over there? So.
Wait, you're telling me you're a game designer that can get distracted? I'm calling shenanigans. Yeah. Never's gonna happen. And for everybody that's listening on my end, I just started my car, turned the AC on because I think my phone might be getting warm, so I'm pushing it up through the dash vents to blow onto the phone. It's like turning on my car to cool down my phone.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
So you've got 17 days left on Black Paper Moon. What is your like? Because is this going to be your first like product that you're launching into Roll20 as a new product, or are you going to do some with Roll20 and then print your own and sell on your website and everything as well?
Yeah. So funny enough, the sort of the inception of it was kind of odd because I actually had a whole different plan. But Black Paper Moon actually started off with a different name right before launch. It was called a Bittersweet Trick or Treat. And I had technically already kind of had a small release of that back in like 2016. And the game's been played for several years. That's why I felt confident to be able to put it out, because we've been playing it for the last like 6 years or so. Kind of like on and off though. But a lot of people, I wanted to kind of break it apart where it didn't have to necessarily be so focused on Halloween, where it still had the spooky vibe though, if you wanted, but it wasn't like, hey, this is just like the Bittersweet Trick or Treat thing. So it kind of got like rebranded. All the artwork that you see, the box, all that's brand new. I just kind of kicked it in overdrive because Kickstarter was having they have a new thing this month that they've never tried before called Witch Starter. And it's essentially like a separate category that you can be discovered in as long as your product is started somewhere in October and has kind of like a spooky theme.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they reached out to their creators and they basically told us that. And they told us that I think a month before. No, it was 2 months before. So it was in August. And I currently I wasn't planning on doing a Kickstarter because for like the last 5 years, I basically told myself I'd never do a Kickstarter in October, November, December, because I'm always the busiest those months. And also October is like my birthday month, and like it's the time where I'm trying to spend the most time with family for the holidays. I also work at a pop culture store in the mall. I manage the store there, and so it's very busy there. So I was like, I'm not doing any Kickstarters October, November, December. But this like Witch Starter thing like popped up, and then also we didn't do as many Kickstarters previously in the year and didn't really do as much on that end of the project. So I just kind of saw this as an opportunity. And I know I still have not addressed your question yet. So this is like a long kind of origin story about how we got there. But the idea is we're doing a full-on like sort of like wholesale buy with the funding. And the more funding we get from the Kickstarter, not only the better can we make the product, but we can also order more copies of it, and then have more that we can actually take to conventions and sell, give out to people and stuff like that. But let's see. I think that answers your question. Yeah. So the main thing is I'm buying a bunch of it wholesale. It's going to be shipped to my place. We're going to be selling it from our website. We'll have some at the conventions and events, but we're not going to have as many copies as some of the card games, because the card games that we make are way more affordable to make at a higher cost. So like with our limited budget, like we get in like 1,000 copies of Guillotine, 1,000 copies of Spell Singers, and with Black Paper Moon, it's going to be considerably less by comparison. But it's always kind of seeing like what works and what doesn't work. So like we'll have it out there, we'll see how popular it is, how much people like it at conventions. And I love any game that I make. So any game that has like the love or attention added to it, I'm completely cool with doubling down, providing content for it, expanding its avenues, putting it on Roll20 or whatever other platforms people want it on. But it's just kind of seeing like where the attention is, what people like, what people are receptive to, and if I should be doubling down on a game I've released, I should be working on a new project.
Awesome. Somebody in the chat asked about what are some of your, because you talked about there's always a fantasy element in all your games so far. What are some of your influences, be it books, movies, or manga?
Okay, so you're kind of breaking apart a little bit, but I heard that there's a question in the chat asking for some influences, whether it's, you said something or manga.
So if you click on the chat in the oh geez, I think my phone is gone.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. Aside from fantasy, what are some books, movies, anime, manga, or other genre works that influence your game designs? Yeah, so the interesting part about games is there's always like the mechanical side, and then there's like the story and the lore side. I'm pretty inspired by. I try to look for inspiration from anything and everything, and I think what makes some of the most interesting designs is when you actually borrow inspiration from places and things you wouldn't expect. Like here's a very weird example that's a little on topic, but I promise I'll circle back around. But when my wife first met, Final Fantasy 15 came out. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. I wrote Final Fantasy and played the Final Fantasy 15 together. She had never played the game before, any games in the series. And me and her liked it. It was a fun game for us to play together. And in that game, the crew actually goes to these like small diners as they go throughout the world. And the diner has such a cool vibe to it. And growing up, I never liked that experience or that vibe of the diner. But playing this game made me want to seek out diners. So now whenever Abby and myself go to different towns or cities, we try different diners. We actually found a local diner in Greenville that we never heard of prior to that. And so I was inspired by Final Fantasy things to start going to diners and going out of my way, eating at these places that aren't like normal commercial chains. And now it's like a really fun experience. Now I'm going to places to. So my point in saying that is I find inspiration from anything and I try to apply it to not only my games, but parts of my life. So what are some books, movies, anime, manga, other genre works that influence you? Yeah, so it kind of differs based on what it is. When it's Paper Moon, there's definitely some inspiration from Soul Eater, which a lot of people will attribute the name is like the reference there for Soul Eater, which Soul Eater is a very fun anime for everyone that is open to something that kind of the same tone goes very silly and fun. There's zombies and werewolves and witches. So Soul Eater is one. Konosuba, something like Overlord. But yeah, I'd say those specifically for Black Paper Moon. There's a game that came out called Kakagure that means addict. That came out a few years ago as an anime. And it's actually watching through that, their season 2 actually inspired the game design behind Guillotine. Because Guillotine's mechanic feels like it feels like you're kind of playing blackjack, but as you're playing, you don't want to go past 13 and everyone shares the number. And that game was very much inspired by watching that anime, right? Because they play like lots of gambling games. But yeah, it's a lot of different things. Sometimes it's video games, sometimes it's anime. It can really be
I think we're
anything.
both having some technical difficulties. We're both coming through pretty garbled, I think.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
I hate to call this because it's a good conversation. Would you be available for Thursday evening this week by any chance?
Which evening?
Because I think we're both hitting our
Which evening
technical
did you-
limits. Technology is awesome, but I think we're both now hitting it to the point where we're not getting. Let's see. Mrs. says that's
Yeah,
the
I got
20th.
you.
Oh,